Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to share this particular video with you. I know that a lot of you are wondering, like, is psychology the really kind of right route for me? And I think that there's so much that you have to consider when you go within a psychology career route. And some of the things that I just want to share with you today might help you to make a decision, an informed decision about whether a career in psychology is going to be right for you or whether you want to kind of maybe go about doing something else. Now, a lot of people feel that when you just do a psychology degree, you can't do anything else with your degree, and that's not true. And I will definitely be doing a video about non-psychological related jobs that you can do with a psychology degree. However, today we are going to be focusing on what you can do to really prep for a career within psychology, because there's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration. So let's get into it. So the first thing that you really want to think about is your time and the commitment that you can make towards a career in psychology. If you think about a career in psychology, you are essentially becoming like a therapist or a doctor or even just like a practitioner of the mind. And it's very much like becoming a doctor, where you spend like nearly 10 years in education and placements to really get to where you want to be, to that consultant stage. So a consultant stage for medics would be equivalent to like a psychologist or like a fully qualified accredited therapist role within psychology. And I guess what you want to do is you want to really think about, you know, if you're going to become a doctor or a therapist of the mind, then it's not going to happen over a couple of years. It's not going to be like a 2 or 3 year thing. It's actually going to be a lot longer. And to become a psychologist, it would take you like a minimum of at least 7 years. And that's without the years that you do in between, gaining your work experience and everything else that you want to do to make sure you shine within the psychology kind of application process and interview process. That is one thing that you just want to think about, is actually, am I committed? Do I feel like I can fit in the other aspects of my life around this? And am I happy to kind of take 1 year at a time to get to the career that I want? Or is it that you're hoping for something that's just going to get you into an accredited role fairly quickly, and then you can just kind of stay within that role? So those are the main things that you really want to think about in terms of time and commitment. Now, this very nicely leads me on to the next part that you want to think about, which is financial commitment. Now, financial commitment means things that you want to kind of buy and make a part of your life, in your personal life, but also things that you want to account for when it comes to your psychology career. Personal life. You might be a person that wants to buy a house or wants to rent on your own. A significant amount of rent in London, for example, would knock you about £1,000 to £2,000. So you've really got to be thinking about the financial commitment that you can make in terms of like your savings, or in terms of, you know, making financial commitments to these kinds of mortgages and things like that you actually want to get to either buy a house or, you know, live on your own, for example, if you want to take on that kind of high rent fee. So the reason why I mention this is because when you go into a career in psychology, you don't actually get to a point where you are earning a significant salary to really live off yourself until you get to sort of practitioner level roles. And the reason being is that the work experience roles that you get up until those practitioner roles don't really pay very much. So just to give you an idea of how things pay within the psychology careers field, so when you are starting off with getting your experience, if you work in the NHS, you work against something called the Agenda for Change scale. And what that means is that you work across different bands to help you to really work your way up within the NHS. Now, when you are kind of getting those work experience roles, whether it's a healthcare worker or a support worker, you might be starting off at that kind of band 2 and 3, which is about, I think it's about £16,000 to £17,000, which isn't enough, especially if you're living in London. But it can be fine if you're living out of London, or if you're living with your parents and you have kind of other people to look after you whilst you're kind of building your experience. So this is the reason why I always say it's really important to try and gain as much experience as you possibly can whilst you're at university. Once you move kind of up into the band 4, the band 5, and that might be kind of like the trainee, PWP, EMHP, CYP kind of like mental health graduate roles. That is when you get paid kind of a band 4 and a band 5, and then you move up to kind of the psychologists, the trainee psychologists, the trainee clinical associate practitioner roles, and in those roles you get like a band 6, band 7, and then you can work your way up in management if you want to a band 8, band 8A. But again, like when you want to work your way up in management, you really have to obtain the kind of senior psychologist or the senior clinical posts in order to actually move up within the management route as well. It's not just like you can get like a graduate mental health worker role and then move up into like one of those clinical lead posts. There's only like I think there's only one place that I know that does that, but again, they don't pay you as much as those senior positions. They still kind of keep you at that band 5, maybe 6 salary posts. So again, you want to think about your financial commitments and think about whether the psychology route is going to help you sustain the life that you want, and also to make sure that it's going to help you to achieve the personal goals that you have, if you do want to buy a house and things like that, and if you've not got any savings and you want to save. It can take a while to get to those kind of senior posts when you are building yourself up within a psychology career, because getting the experience, working towards certain roles, applying, interviewing, getting onto training can take a few years at least. The next thing that you want to consider when you are building a career in psychology is the speciality that you want to go into. Psychology is a very broad topic, so a lot of the times people can start in psychology and then kind of get lost somewhere along the way because they're not really specializing in a specific area, or they're not really kind of tailoring their route to a specific kind of role. Now obviously there are roles that you can do which cover lots of different things. For example, the clinical doctorate. As a clinical doctorate, you can work in an IAP service, or you can work privately, or you can work in even a forensic setting as a clinical psychologist, because it allows you to dip your toes into lots of different things. Even though it allows you to dip into lots of different roles, you still want to be specific if you are wanting to take that particular role. So if you are wanting to move towards clinical psychology, then you want to make sure that your career plan reflects that particular role. Now, if you are a person that wants to move into other kind of practitioner roles, for example, if you want to move into like a psychodynamic route, then it might be that your route looks completely different to that of somebody that is trying to achieve the clinical doctorate route. I think that being said, like, everybody's route in psychology looks completely different because everybody gets different experience in lots of different places. No two people actually have the same route. So just because you see someone doing something doesn't mean that you have to do it. But yeah, you really want to think about your speciality and like what is it that you actually want to go into and who is it that you want to work with. So for example, do you want to work with children, adults, elderly? Do you want to work with people who have learning disabilities, who are part of the forensic system, who may be experiencing kind of trauma? What is it that you really want to kind of specialize in? Now you can specialize in 2 or 3 different things, like children and trauma, or elderly people in forensics. It doesn't really matter. However, you want to be clear about what your speciality is so that you can again help yourself to work towards that particular route, and you can play out your career plan according to those particular speciality areas. The next thing that you want to think about is accreditation. Accreditation matters especially when you are starting out in psychology. For example, your BSc psychology degree, it's really helpful to have one that is BPS accredited. BPS is the British Psychological Society that helps to govern the education and the kind of work experience that people get here in the UK according to psychology. And if you don't have a BSc psychology degree that's BPS accredited, it can be very hard to get onto the clinical doctorate and to other kinds of training here in the UK. If you don't have a BPS psychology degree, that's okay. You can go ahead and do a master's conversion course, which a lot of people from non-psychology backgrounds actually end up doing if they want to work in psychology. But it's just a shame that if you've spent your time doing the psychology degree, that you have to go and do an MSc for the BPS accreditation. It's just annoying. So when you are starting out, just make sure that any degree that you choose within psychology is BPS accredited. And then obviously once you move on from that, any kind of accreditation that you're doing, make sure that it is linked to one of the BPS or the psychotherapy or counselling and psychotherapy organisations. There's lots of different governing bodies out there, which I will pop in this screen. And you can go ahead and just give them a Google search and just see kind of what they ask for in terms of qualifications and accreditations in order to move up within the career that you want. And again, like, it's really important that you are paying attention to all the different certifications that are involved as part of your career journey, because you want to make sure that they are accredited by a reputable source. A lot of people go online and do courses on Udemy and places like Skillshare or other kinds of things out there, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong, and it's actually great if you do those things and put them on your CV. But just note that they're not accredited. You won't be able to work as a licensed registered practitioner according to the BPS or the BABCP or the UkCP. Because it's not registered by them. Now, there are some places that do great online courses like FutureLearn and the Centre of Excellence, which is fantastic. You can go on there and have a look at some mental health courses that might be aligning with you, and that might kind of give you more ideas about the speciality that you want to go into. But you've got to realise that although they look great on your CV and your personal statements and things like that, they're not giving you accreditations to actually work as an accredited therapist. So just note that. The next thing that you want to think about is your experience. One of the things in psychology that you really want to think about is, am I gaining the right experience for the role that I want to go into? A lot of people do experience in one particular role. For example, they'll work with children for like 4 or 5 years, just in one role, like working with children of the same kind, and not really looking at diverse kind of populations of patients. And then they go to kind of apply for a trainee role, for example, for a clinical doctorate, let's use for example, and what ends up happening is that they don't end up getting on the training. And that might be because you don't have a diverse amount of work experience. So when you are getting into psychology, you might think, oh, I'm just going to spend a year getting experience and then I can go into the psychology doctorate, like it'll be totally fine. And yeah, that might work for some people, but really what they're looking for is a depth and a breadth of experience that you have. That means that you have looked at different populations, different patients, different kinds of people, to really identify like what your specialist area is, and to make sure that you have really thoroughly thought about what it is that you want to do. Sometimes people will apply for certain training roles because they just want to get ahead, and they're not really thinking about the kinds of people that they're going to be working with and the difference that they're going to make to certain people's lives. So it's really easy to see past that in an interview stage or in an application when the recruitment panel are sieving through kind of the different applications. So it's really important that what you're doing is genuine, authentic, and you can do that by really kind of building on your work experience. So when you are building on your work experience, it can take some time. It can take a couple of years to gain the right experience. And again, this is why I say start building your experience whilst you're at university. Instead of doing a retail job or something that's kind of really basic and easy, try to do something that's more mental health specific and specific to a specialist area that you want to go into. Because again, when you come out of university, it will be a lot easier for you to obtain some of the training roles that you really want to get to, a lot easier, rather than feeling like you have to start from the bottom and work your way up. The next thing that you want to think about is your personal triggers and your personal mental health. Now, the reason why I say this is because when you're working in mental health, there's lots of things that you can hear, you can see, you can be exposed to, which can impact you and your mental health. And when that happens, a lot of the time people are like, oh, I don't think I can go into this, I don't think I can continue this. And that's totally fine if you've kind of worked your way through that. But you want to think about this before you go into psychology, because remember, psychology is about supporting people through their mental health. So even if you are impacted by certain things, whilst you're working with other people, you can obviously get supervision and support for that, but at the end of the day you are going to keep coming back to that environment because that is the environment that you work in. So if you are a person that cannot deal with certain things that really kind of trigger you, think about choosing a specialist area where you may not come across those particular things. Of course, any part of mental health that you go into is going to be challenging, because mental health is challenging. We all know that, you and me as well. You know, we've all dealt with mental health. We know how challenging it can be for ourselves and for the people that are around us. So you really want to make sure that if you still want to go into a certain area that you are really interested in, even if it can be slightly triggering, that you have the right support networks and the people around you that you can lean on to support you. That can make a huge difference if people around you really understand what you do and really understand kind of what you're about and the work that you do. So it really helps to have a supportive network around you that can support you through the work that you do. The next thing that you want to think about is competition. Competition is something that I am trying to, as a psychology careers coach, slow down and really kind of, I don't want competition to exist in psychology, but unfortunately, because of the way the government have set up certain posts and certain opportunities, it does become competitive even without us wanting it to be so. Now, the thing about psychology is that you can apply for a training post 2, 3, 4, 5 times and still not get onto a training role. And that might be because you have everything that you need to do the role, however somebody else also has the same and they might have got there first, like their application may have come through first. Or it might be that somebody has seen kind of more potential in somebody else because of certain experiences that they have or certain things that they have done. And it's always like, okay, well, how can I just get ahead of everybody else? And it's like sometimes you can do everything that you possibly can, but you can't get ahead, because when they are selecting applicants through the kind of application stage, they're trying to make the process as fair as possible. So sometimes it might be that they have to random pick people. So if there are like 20 places and there are 50 candidates that are perfect, then it might be that they have to randomly pick 20 people from those 50 people to make sure that they are the ones that are chosen for those 20 places. So even if you do everything that you possibly can, sometimes it's not personal, it's strategic, where they have a system that they use to pick their candidates, and it's not about you not being good enough, it's just that there are limited funded places on certain kind of training routes, and not everybody can get onto them every single year. So that's another thing that you really want to think about, is that there is a big competitive culture within psychology. This is where you really want to think about like a plan B or an alternative, like self-funded route or something like that, that if you can't find a funded route, then how can you save or how can you support yourself part-time even to do a route that might be self-funded. And yeah, it's not easy, it's not fair, you know, if some people get to do it funded and you don't. But you've got to really think about your end goal and what it is that you want to achieve, and whether you are willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And that might mean sometimes trying alternative routes and different kinds of routes to help yourself get there. And again, like, it doesn't mean that you have to get to a certain point by a certain age or a certain time in your life, because the thing about psychology is that it is a progressive route. It's not something that you can just do a simple bit of training in and that's it, you can be a practitioner for the rest of your life. No, it's actually that you have to keep evolving the way that humanity evolves. A lot of the time you can again get lost within that kind of, you know, like you just want to kind of get to like a psychologist post or a therapist post in the quickest, easiest way possible. And it's like, actually, how well-rounded of a practitioner will you be if you try to rush your way to the top? What psychologists do you know that have rushed their way to the top? Going back to the experience point as well, like thinking about making sure that your work experience really overwhelms your academic studies, because nowadays employers are really looking for work experience more than kind of academic studies. So yeah, have a think about whether it's something that you can do and really take on that sort of attitude where you're not getting sucked into that competitive culture. The next thing that you want to do is make sure that you have a solid career plan ready to kind of act on. And that is because when you are coming out of university, you can feel really lost, you can feel like there's lots of things going on, people acting and kind of applying for different kinds of things, and it can feel really overwhelming. So if you've got a career plan in mind, it can help you to regroup and just kind of gather your thoughts back up in and stay on track. And that can be really important within the psychology career, because you know, you can go off track really quickly. You can feel like, oh, it's taking so long. Why is it taking so long? I might as well just do something in recruitment or something in retail, something in admin. Like, those are particularly, like, they're fine things. But, you know, if you want to stay true to what you want to do in psychology, you have to be resilient. You have to have a career plan there ready for you to follow so that you are staying on track and you're monitoring your progress. The next thing that you want to think about when it comes to a career in psychology is what I mentioned before. I think I'm overlapping a lot of these points as well, but it's really just about your CPD. The psychology career is progressive, so like I said, you can't be that person that just wants to do 1 year of training and then be like, oh, I'm just going to sit here as a therapist and I'm not going to move, and that's it. I'm going to work like this for the rest of my life. It's really a very progressive profession, which means that, like I said, you have to be open to getting your own kind of personal development training. Whether you're in private practice, you'd have to kind of set that up yourself, or if you work for an NHS organisation or a private organisation, They might be in charge of kind of sending you off to certain training events or conferences where you gather a lot of new information and you share it with the team. So you have to be a person that's willing to kind of learn and keep that research and kind of like explorative attitude going, because that is what's going to help you to become a well-rounded psychologist and practitioner, is being able to kind of like really research and apply and implement theory into practice in lots of different ways. And the only way that you can do that is by continuously kind of developing and looking at new ways of working with people. There are new kinds of therapies coming out all the time. There's lots of different things that are on trial, even probably as we speak. So it is about you being able to want to be kind of a part of that. So it's really thinking about whether you've got the attitude and the drive to really do that within a psychology career. The final thing that I just want to cover with you in terms of a career in psychology and being ready for it is to really note your personality and the kind of personality you have. The reason why I say this is because, again, when it comes to a career in psychology, you're not just giving advice, you're not just telling people what to do and giving them the kind of best way of leading their life. No. Psychology is not about telling people what to do. Psychology is about holding a space for people so that they can explore and reach their own potential in their own way, and so that they can grow. If you just keep telling someone what to do, you're not really going to grow. So you have to be a kind of personality that's willing to be patient and sit with people and hold a space for them, whether it be through traumatic events, whether it be through distressing life kind of situations, whether it be just through kind of exploring their future, and really not kind of influencing their journey because of what you think and who you are. And that's why your personality really matters, is because you have to be aware of your own biases and your own influences in life. If you are a person that finds it difficult to really kind of put your biases to the side and allow someone to just kind of show up as they are in their own space as their own self, then it might be that you might find it difficult to allow that person to kind of explore their own potential. Because as a therapist or a coach or a psychological practitioner, you really have to allow your patients to be able to kind of find themselves and guide them through kind of certain psychological interventions. But it's really just about kind of, I guess, being open to different ideas of life. And the person that's sitting in front of you as a patient may not have the same ideas of life as you. So you have to be aware of the biases and the things in your head that are telling you that what they're doing is wrong. Because at the end of the day, what they're doing is probably not wrong, unless obviously it's something that is of a concern safety-wise, or like, you know, something that is actually wrong. But generally speaking, you know, your idea of life might be completely different to somebody else's. So your personality has to be in a way where you are open to exploring that with that person, rather than just telling them what to do. So those are the 10 things that I wanted to share with you in terms of how you can think about kind of going about your career in psychology, and just kind of the things that you want to consider when you are working towards a well-rounded kind of route towards a career in psychology. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you've got any questions or any comments about anything that I've said, or you want me to elaborate on certain points, leave me a comment below and I'll try and do another video on those particular topics. I hope you guys found it helpful. Don't forget to check me out on all the other social media platforms that I'm on, because I share a lot of useful free content there as well. And if you do want that kind of tailored one-to-one individual support, you know where you can find me on Instagram. Just send me a DM and hit me up and I will get in touch with you and we can take it from there. I hope you have a lovely day and I'll see you guys in the next one. Vivi! Why do you always have to do that?